revealed terrifying encounters of a park ranger in the haunted, sinister caves of the Forgotten. Mark could feel the weight of something unseen watching him, lurking just beyond the trees as dusk settled over the forgotten caves. The silence swallowed every sound, but the forest had a heartbeat tonight, an echo of unseen eyes and hidden dangers. What had sounded like a simple assignment now felt like a curse. Shadows danced beyond the flickering beam of his flashlight, twisting and writhing as if they had lives of their own. He heard tales of campers vanishing and dark spirits that were said to whisper wickedness. The locals called it folklore. But he was beginning to wonder what was truth and what was myth. As he patrolled the heavily overgrown trails, the familiar chirps of crickets had gone still. Not even the nightingales dared sing. Mark's heart raced as he scanned the treeline. Something was very wrong. It was the absence of life that gnawed at him, the eerie quiet that settled like a thick fog. He shook off the unease, reminding himself that he was a protector of this land. Fear had no place in the woods. Then, right at the cave's entrance, a pair of glowing eyes pierced the dark like daggers. They blinked, then vanished. He stumbled back, breath hitching in his throat. Was that real, or just a trick of his own imagination? No, it couldn't be. Rational thought clawed at the edges of his mind, but a primal whisper urged him to flee. Still, he couldn't give in. He had a job to do. Hours passed, and as twilight deepened, life flickered back into the forest when a single mother and her young son, Lisa and Ben, arrived. Mark felt an instant kinship with them, a fleeting sense of hope in a place that seemed to thrive on despair. They were looking for refuge, a weekend escape from the grit of life, just like he had once desired. But Mark's heart grew heavy as he shared warnings of the caves. Tales of those who had wandered too deep and never returned. Just then, a chilling scream sliced through the night, freezing them in place. Mark's instincts kicked in, and he commanded calm in his voice as he rallied the pair. Stay close. Each step forward felt like a march into the very mouth of horror. As they crept through the trees, Mark's mind was racing, picturing shadows that were more than mere figments, visions of what lay between the lines of folklore. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue as Mark shone his beam into the dark. Shadows flickered and twisted, surrounding them with a suffocating presence. Voices barely audible, echoing through the trees, begging for release. He sensed it now. The darkness wasn't just the forest, it was alive. With every crackle of branches, whispers twisted words into threats. The very land beneath their feet seemed charged with a malevolent energy. Escape wasn't just improbable. It felt impossible. He turned to Lisa, heart pounding. The look in her eyes mirrored his own, a mix of confusion and raw terror. We need to get back, he shouted. But the words fell flat in the weight of the encroaching night. And in that moment, a terrible realization settled in his gut. One of them might not make it out alive. Shadows churned, and Mark knew they were in more than just a harmless legend. They were being hunted. The darkness coiled around them tighter, every breath heavy with the stench of damp earth and decay. Mark could feel the silencing weight press down on his chest. Survival instincts flared, adrenaline surged. He had to get Lisa and Ben back to the car, back to safety. This way, he urged, even as uncertainty clawed at his resolve. And the shadows? Branches shifted alongside their movements, whispering threats that danced just outside their hearing. Mark turned briefly, heart sinking deeper as he realized the trail that had felt familiar was now a treacherous maze, twisted and deceptive. The beam of his flashlight struggled against the creeping darkness, illuminating only fleeting glimpses of the trees that loomed like sentinels, judging their every step. Lisa clutched Ben's hand, eyes wide and terrified. I thought this would be fun, she murmured, shaking. a crack in her brave facade that shattered Mark's courage. It was supposed to be an adventure. Keep moving, Mark interrupted, knowing too well that to linger was to lose what little hope they had left. The air thickened with a low hum, vibrating off the cave walls. Was that laughter? A cruel echo that reverberated through the stones like mockery. Suddenly, the boy stopped. Mom, I feel something. His voice trembled, small against the all-consuming night. Mark knelt beside Ben, scanning the darkness with terror-filled eyes. What do you feel, buddy? It's looking at me, the child whispered, trembling. Mark felt a chill run down his spine, stiffening at the childhood fear creeping into their reality. Before he could dismiss it, Lisa gasped, lifting a hand toward the cave entrance. A shadow uncoiled from the darkness, long and serpentine, shifting with a life of its own. Low growls resonated from beyond, coaxing dread into their hearts. Mark stumbled backward, a strangled scream caught in his throat. Run, he shouted, grasping Lisa and Ben's wrists and pulling them back into the forest. Branches lashed out as if resisting their escape. Mark's heart pounded in sync with the haunting rustles behind them, breathing down their necks, laughing. The forest had come alive to feast on their fear. They tore past trees, the flashlight flickering wildly. Panic surged as Mark turned, catching a momentary glimpse of what pursued them, a twisted silhouette with eyes glowing like molten coals. It roared, a sound that lashed at their sanity, and the earth trembled beneath the weight of its malice. He forced his legs to run faster, each beat of his heart screaming of inevitable doom. I can't. Ben's voice choked as he struggled to keep pace. Mark's mind raced, fear morphing into horror. He had to keep them safe, but the path blurred before him, each choice an entry into deeper madness. Ahead, the flashlight flickered once more and cut out, plunging them into darkness heavier than the night itself. Mark? Lisa's voice trembled, panic amplifying the shadows around them. Don't stop, he barked, his own fear turning into a desperate roar. But then, in the pitch-black void, a skeletal hand shot from the ground, grasping at Ben's ankle. The boy screamed, and without thinking, Mark lunged forward. Ben! But as Mark reached for him, time stretched. The pull of the shadows claimed Ben, plunging the child into a maw of darkness, laughter echoing like a death knell. The last thing Mark saw was Lisa diving for her son, her outstretched hand grasping at nothingness. A sickening realization crashed into Mark. He was part of this horror now, and it craved more than just his fear. It needed his spirit to feed its insatiable hunger, and he could feel the ground beneath him tremble, alive with ancient wrath. The forest was demanding a tribute, and it seemed to have decided who its prey would be. As he staggered back, the darkness closed in around them. All light snuffed out, and in the silence echoed with an ultimatum. He had to make a choice. Would he give in, or fight until the very last breath? One echoed thought spiraled through his mind. It wasn't just them who were trapped. Something darker had unleashed its grip, and it was waiting for him to finally succumb. In that suffocating darkness, he heard a voice whisper his name. Mark, join us. What awaited him in the depths when he finally betrayed everything he had fought for? Mark stumbled back, heart racing, feeling as if the ground might swallow him whole. The darkness hung thick like a curtain, isolating him from the world outside. He could hear it now, the whispers, melodic yet grotesque, taunting him with promises he couldn't quite grasp. It was the sound of lost souls, of those who had ventured into this abyss but never returned. Ben! Lisa's desperate cry sliced through the void. The primal fear in her voice dug deep into Mark's gut. He thought of her and Ben, of their laughter on sun-drenched hikes, now warped into this nightmare. He had to find a way out. He had to shield them from this demonic embrace, but he spun in the all-consuming dark, sensing wild eyes trailing him, a feral hunger igniting the air. Then silence wrapped around them and filled the space where Ben's voice had been. Felt like a weighted blanket, suffocating and confining. I can't. Lisa's voice broke again, a sound of pure despair. Please, stay close, he shouted back, though his own voice wavered, betraying the storm within. The darkness shifted, throbbing with life, fingers of shadow clawing at the remaining shreds of hope. Mark swung the flashlight, desperate to pierce through, but the batteries were dead, flickering out, leaving them in the clutches of pure, oppressive night. "Hold on to me." He grasped her wrist, pulling Lisa closer. Together they moved forward, feeling for any sign of the path as the ground squelched beneath them. It felt wrong, as if the earth itself conspired against their escape. Then, suddenly, an ear-splitting roar erupted from the shadows, a guttural sound that made the very trees tremble. "What is that?" Lisa gasped. Fear sparkled in her wide eyes, glistening in the darkness. "I don't know," Mark panted, pushing forward. But every step felt heavier, as if the intent of the forest was to drag them back, to offer them up willingly into the darkness that wanted them so badly. He searched through the inky blackness, hoping against hope that Ben would somehow return, that he had managed to free himself from the clutches of the shadows. But a gnawing doubt clawed at him, echoing every moment they pressed on. And then his foot caught on something, a root, slick with moisture. He toppled forward, the ground rushing to meet him. As he fell, the dim outline of something shifted near them, silently hovering, darker than the night around it. Mark's heart blasted against his ribcage as a familiar face emerged from the black. It was a specter of a man he thought he'd long buried in childhood fears. "Dad?" The name came out as a breathless whisper, doubts flooding in. His father's visage was lost yet distorted with shadow, the man who had vanished without explanation. "Is it really you? Join us, Mark," the specter breathed, the voice echoing with hollow sorrow. "The darkness is our home. Get away from him," Lisa screamed, stepping protectively in front of Mark. But another low growl echoed back, this time vibrating through their bones. It was behind them, circling. Mark struggled to grasp his racing mind. If this was a trick, he couldn't give in. But his father's eyes held a pull of familiar sorrow he couldn't negate. "No!" Mark shouted, defiance igniting within him. He felt Lisa's trembling hand tightening around his, urging him back to reality, back to their mission. But the darkness shifted once again, and a cruel laughter bounced through the trees. "Find your child, Mark, or join him in our world." The thin veil of hope quivered, threatening to unravel. Just what had this cursed place revealed? In that chilling moment, Mark realized they were not just lost souls. They were inside a nightmare with a will of its own, each twist of fate designed to break them, one heart at a time. The echoes of their despair collided with the restless whispers, and as the eyes of the lost congregated, thickening the shadows, Mark's breath vanished into the night. "Run! Don't look back!" he yelled, feeling that all-encompassing dread grasp him tighter. But something darker than fear lurked behind them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And as they fled into the claustrophobic grip of the forest, he couldn't shake the lurking question. Would they find Ben before it was too late, or had the shadows already claimed him as their own? They burst into a small clearing, a patch of starless sky hanging above them like a void waiting to swallow them whole. Mark's lungs burned with each ragged breath as he strained to listen. The silence that filled the space was alarming, heavy like a lead weight. "Do you hear that?" Lisa whispered, her voice barely escaping her cracked lips. Mark held his breath, peering through the darkness. He could feel it, something was there. The air shifted, a cold breeze that slid through the trees, rustling leaves like low murmurings of old secrets. It sent shivers racing down his spine as he took a step back, instinctively bumping into Lisa. She jumped, her eyes wide with panic. "Mark, what if it catches up to us?" "Don't think like that. We have to keep moving." He forced the words out, but his heart slammed against his ribs as dread curled in his gut. But where could they go? The shadows around them pulsated, a dark tide that encircled their fragile light. They needed a plan, and fast. "What about that way?" Lisa pointed into the thickness of the forest, where gnarled branches leaned like ominous sentinels. Maybe Mark hesitated, but before he could respond, a sickening sound erupted from behind, a crash of twigs, followed by a menacing growl that seemed to vibrate through the air. "Run," he ordered, grabbing her wrist again, sprinting into the dense forest. Shadows danced around them, twisting shapes with every shift of light. Branches tore at their clothes, stories of the forest weaving through the chaos, wrapping tighter and tighter around them. Mark's mind raced, visions of lost children and foreboding whispers haunted him. What had become of Ben? Mark, stop, Lisa gasped, pulling him back as they almost collided with a tree trunk. We have to think. A brief second of calm fell over them. Mark's eyes searched the darkness, hoping for a clue, anything that could lead them out. He tried to shake off the despair clinging to his thoughts, but it hung there, grim and oppressive, narrowing his focus with each pulse. A sound creaked from behind a groan that echoed like it was dragging itself through the underbrush. Please, no, Lisa whimpered, her face pale, reflecting the terror they both felt. Mark turned to face it, his heart racing. As the creature lumbered closer, he saw what seemed like flickering eyes, darting like silver daggers through the trees. Stay behind me, he warned, bracing himself as the shadowed form stepped into view. It wasn't just a creature. It wore the faces of the lost, distorted, pleading eyes hollowed out as if the very life had been ripped away. They were souls trapped in this darkness, yearning for freedom. Lisa tugged at his sleeve, terror evident in her voice. What do we do? The mass before them writhed, weaving in and out of familiar silhouettes, friends, neighbors, all engulfed by the void. Mark's courage faltered. Would he become just another face among them if he wavered? Hold on. We need to go around it, he exclaimed, though doubt prickled at his resolve. But as they began to sidestep, the creature lunged. An ear-splitting roar shattered the silence, echoing then fading into demoralizing silence. With adrenaline pumping, Mark grabbed Lisa's hand and shoved forward, but the ground beneath them rippled, a gravitational pull that warped the very fabric of this cursed forest. His mind screamed for a way back, to the light, to safety, but then they stumbled upon a cavern entrance, a gaping darkness that beckoned with ghastly whispers and the stench of decay. Is that? Lisa's voice faltered, fear flaring anew. I don't know, but we can't stay out here. Mark pulled her toward the maw of darkness as the creature's roar filled the air. The shadow was gaining on them, proximity drumming at his heart as they crossed the threshold. Shadows rushed to greet them, swallowing them whole. What awaited them in the depths of the cave? Could it be darkness incarnate? Or perhaps the key to saving Ben? An echo of laughter followed them into the dark, chilling their bones as they plunged into the unknown. Mark, what now? But the shadows knew their answer. They were about to find out if they were chosen to confront the nightmare that lay within, or if they too would become part of its festering history. The cave swallowed them whole, a gaping mouth of darkness that echoed with an unnatural silence. The air inside was thick, damp, and stale, sending prickles of unease crawling over Mark's skin. With only a dim light from the headlamp he fished out of his pocket, Mark swung it around, illuminating jagged rock walls that glimmered with moisture. It's cold, Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. The deeper they went, the more he could sense her fear coiling tighter. Stay close, Mark murmured, feeling the weight of the oppressive darkness very palpably. It was almost alive, shifting and moving around them, whispering secrets that he could barely grasp as they ventured further. The walls began to narrow, a constricting passage that felt like they were being hunted. The laughter from outside faded, replaced by a growing hum that vibrated off the rocks. It resonated in Mark's bones, a siren call that tugged at something deep inside him. What was it? Were they waking something? And not so deep, Lisa stammered. I feel it. Something is in here. Just a little further for now. We have to find a way out. His voice barely masked his own rising panic, but he couldn't show weakness. Not now. Suddenly, the light flickered. Mark cursed under his breath, and the headlamp blinked out, plunging them into utter blackness. Panic coursed through his veins like ice. Hold on, he gasped as he fumbled for it. A flick of the switch brought it back to life, dimmer but working. Mark, Lisa cried, her voice a raw edge of terror. I felt something brush against me. A chill slithered down Mark's spine. What? I didn't see a heavy thud echoed from deeper within the cave, vibrating through the stone, loud and deliberate. It was unlike any sound he'd heard before. Mark's heart raced. Was it the creature? Did it follow them here? Mark, we should go back. Lisa's urgency rattled him. He could hear her breathing quickening, could sense her debating escape over resolve. No, we'll get lost, he urged, forcing his feet to move forward. Yet with each step, the air grew thicker, as if they were walking through an invisible fog that clutched at their bodies. Then, from behind one of the rock formations, he caught a glimpse. A flash of white, too pale, too still. His stomach dropped. Was it another lost soul? Lisa, wait, he reached for her. But it was too late. The figure emerged, floating just above the floor, hair wild, eyes wide and empty. Mark's breath hitched. Please, help us, it whispered, voice a haunting echo that chilled the very essence of his being. It wasn't just a plea. It held a warning, the weight of their panic reflected back in its hollow gaze. Mark stumbled back, nerves fraying. This can't be real. The figure's face cracked into an agonized grin, as if mocking their fear. You're not safe here, it croaked, its form beginning to blink in and out of existence, as if the shadows were pulling it back into their depths. No, Mark shouted, lunging forward, but the figure faded away, leaving behind just a silhouette that swayed with the echoes of laughter. What was that? Lisa gasped, fear etched in every feature. Mark swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. I don't know, but we can't stay. A low growl rumbled, shaking the ground beneath them. Something ancient and hungry lurked just beyond their fragile beam of light. As the dark began to envelop them again, they bolted down the passage, but the glow from the headlamp flickered dangerously. With a sharp crack, it plunged them into darkness once more. Then, they heard its scratches, clawing at the cave walls, echoing around them. And just before the world slipped into chaos, Mark whispered, what if it's too late? The darkness seemed to answer, hungry and insatiable. Was it possible they were never meant to escape? Somewhere in the inky blackness, a pair of flickering eyes awaited. Mark's heart hammered in his chest, each beat amplifying the cacophony of his racing thoughts. The faint flicker of his headlamp cast jagged, shifting shadows on the walls, and every corner seemed to pulse with a sinister life of its own. Lisa gripped his arm tightly, knuckles white from fear. Where are we? She gasped, her voice barely breaking through the thick veil of panic. I don't know, he admitted, a chilling realization darkening his thoughts. As they pressed onward, the scratching sounds escalated, joining forces with the growls reverberating through the air. Something was hunting them. Mark, please, Lisa urged, her voice cracking. We have to get out of here. The hum from deeper within the cave intensified, rising in volume like a discordant symphony that thrummed painfully in Mark's ears. He wanted to reassure Lisa, tell her they'd find an exit soon, but the crushing uncertainty strangled his words before they could escape. With a surge of adrenaline, Mark yanked the headlamp closer to the ground, frantically searching for any signs of salvation. The rocky floor was uneven, littered with loose stones and treacherous crevices. Look, Lisa pointed down a branching corridor that flickered at the edges of the light. An eerie phosphorescence glowed faintly, illuminating ancient markings carved into the stone walls. The shapes twisted and danced like trapped souls. What is that? Mark muttered, slowly moving forward, drawn in by the otherworldly glow. Each step felt like a grave mistake, yet his body acted with a will of its own. Lisa clutched his arm tighter. We shouldn't go any closer. He hesitated. The inscription seemed to pulsate, alive, whispering secrets that danced just out of reach. Was it warning or beckoning? Caught within this deadly pull, Mark found himself stepping nearer, the brightness becoming an intoxicating lure that soothed his rising dread. And then silence. The growling ceased, the scratching noises frozen. An oppressive stillness enveloped them, heavier than the darkness. Mark glanced at Lisa, her eyes wide in terror, but before he could reassure her, the ground beneath them trembled violently, sending loose pebbles skittering into the shadows. "Run!" he screamed, adrenaline flooding his veins. As he turned back toward the way they came, they sprinted, the dim light of the headlamp cutting through the pressing blackness, ushering them on a path they no longer understood. The air thickened, each breath hard to choke down as they barreled through the narrow passage. Mark's mind raced. What was down here? What awaited them? As they rounded a corner, the beam of the headlamp caught a glimpse of something massive and dark looming in the distance. It was a form, a figure that was not human but not entirely beast. The growl returned, low and guttural, vibrating in his bones. Its eyes, glowing like hot coals, pierced the hazy darkness and locked onto them. No, Lisa whimpered, her breath hitching. Mark felt frozen, time stretching as the creature approached, each slow, deliberate motion amplifying the horror building within him. Suddenly, the light sputtered again, flickering weakly before plunging them back into fierce oblivion. "Mark!" Her voice echoed, swallowed by the dark. In that moment, fear turned into a primordial instinct to survive. He took Lisa's hand, gripped it tight, and moved, trying to navigate through the chaos of the cave, as sounds twisted and turned around them. And then, out of the void, a whisper slithered through the darkness, a voice both sweet and sinister. "You shouldn't have come here." The echo of those words hung heavy in the stillness and lingered long after they were spoken, drowning out everything, including the chaos in Mark's mind. "Get away!" he yelled. The echo bounced back, answering him with maniacal laughter that seemed to melt into the stone itself. Something wicked had awakened, and Mark couldn't shake the creeping thought that perhaps they were no longer the hunters. The weight of dread dragged them down, deeper into the cave, as the growls transformed into deafening roars. But then came a crack of light farther down the passage. "Do you see that?" Mark gasped, his heart racing as hope flickered in his chest. Was it an exit, or something far worse? "Mark, we need to go now." Lisa pulled at his arm, urging him back. But it was too late. The figure was upon them, and Mark realized then that the hunter had become the hunted. The eyes stared back, and in that moment, all he could think was, what if they were all already too far gone? And somewhere in that darkness, someone was watching, waiting. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around them like a suffocating fog. Mark could hear the creature's heavy breathing, a relentless rhythm that matched the pounding in his chest. He tugged at Lisa, adrenaline surging. This way. They dashed deeper into the cave, the glimmer of the distant light flickering dangerously, teasing them with false hope. With each hurried step, the shadows danced, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to pursue them. In the recesses of his mind, Mark could picture the creature, its gnashing teeth and savage eyes, prowling behind hungry. "Mark!" Lisa's voice broke through the terror, her grip tightening on his arm. "We can't keep running blindly." "Just a little further," he pleaded, not fully convinced himself. The light called to them, a beacon in the crushing darkness. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they were only running toward their doom. As they sprinted forward, Mark stole glances behind them. The darkness swirled ominously, but the creature was nowhere in sight. Anxiety twisted in his gut. Was it waiting for them to falter, to tire? The walls began to close in, the air thick and clammy. "Mark, stop!" Lisa yanked him to a halt. "Look at this." He followed her trembling finger to a crude etching on the cave wall. It depicted a figure, hunched and menacing, surrounded by a ring of lost souls, their faces twisted in eternal agony. The ink was fresh, glistening with moisture. "What is this?" he whispered, the joy of discovery crushed under the weight of the dread that enveloped them. "I think it's a warning," she said, her voice trembling. "Or maybe a trap." Before Mark could respond, the thrumming growl erupted again, louder, closer, as if the creature itself resonated with rage at their intrusion. "We need to move. Now." They bolted down the corridor toward the light, their breaths ragged, hearts racing. Just as they reached the glowing spot, it vanished, extinguished in an instant, leaving them in an even darker void. Mark stumbled, blood roaring in his ears. "Mark!" Lisa cried, panic edging her voice. What happened? He fumbled for the headlamp, praying it hadn't fully died. A flicker, then a weak beam sputtered back to life. Holding it high, he scanned their surroundings. The walls seemed to pulse, drawing nearer, suffocating. Mark stepped cautiously, urging Lisa to follow. Maybe there's a way out, he said, though doubt gnawed at him. Then, out of the silence, a whisper slithered through the cave. You shouldn't have come here. It was the same voice from before, sweet yet dripping with malice. The shadows twisted, and cold fingers of dread slid down Mark's spine. A shallow pit yawned just beside them, covered with debris. He caught sight of bone fragments among the stone, a dark reminder of those who had come before. We're not alone, Mark. Lisa's voice rose to a near scream, dragging him back from the edge. His heart raced. Whatever had claimed this place was still here, alive, and it felt far too close. They turned to flee, but the growling returned, louder, vibrating through the stone. Hide! Mark barked, searching for a crevice or overhang. They stumbled back into the dark, pressing themselves against the wet wall. The growl intensified, reverberating through the cave like thunder. Then came the sound of claws scraping against rock, low and menacing, inching ever closer. Mark's pulse quickened, a chorus of dread striking deep in his gut. He fought the urge to look. The scratching halted abruptly, and a heavy silence fell. It stung like a slap. Sho, he whispered, barely audible. Terror clung to them like a second skin. What was waiting just beyond the reach of their light? The voice echoed again, taunting, coaxing. Join us. Behind him, Lisa quivered. Mark could feel her breath, shallow and quick against his back. In that moment, he realized they had become the bait drawn into this nightmare for an audience he couldn't see. Mark, Lisa murmured, her eyes wide. He turned slowly, dread woven into his very soul. There it stood, a dark silhouette illuminated just enough by the dim light. The creature's eyes blazed brighter than ever, a smoldering abyss ready to swallow them whole. And just like that, a realization swept through him. Escape was no longer an option. It shifted closer, revealing a grotesque grin lined with teeth that glistened in anticipation. No! Mark shouted, terror flooding his veins as he grabbed Lisa's hand, pushing them deeper into the dark. Then the laughter emerged again, buoyant and cruel, as the growls morphed into something far more sinister. And at that moment, as it all drew in around them, the cave opened into a vast chamber, revealing secrets that would alter their fate forever. But was it salvation or their final resting place? A path branched out in front of them, each way seemingly worse than the last. Which way? Lisa gasped, fear evident in her voice. Mark swallowed hard, knowing that whatever decision they made might lead them down the darkest road of all. The air shifted, charged with an unnatural energy, as Mark weighed the options before them. The darkness pressed in like a smothering weight, amplifying every sound to deafening levels. He could almost hear the heartbeat of the cave, steady, rhythmic, and menacing. Left or right? Lisa whispered, eyes darting back to him, full of desperation. Each path looked more foreboding than the last. The left path sank deeper into shadow, a windless tunnel that seemed to swallow sound, while the right path was lined with jagged rocks, glistening ominously. Let us go right, Mark decided, though uncertainty gnawed at him. He didn't know what awaited them in either direction, but the jagged edges felt like they carried a sharper reality. With reluctant steps, they moved toward the right. Each crunch of gravel beneath their feet sounded like a declaration of their presence, a warning to whatever lay hidden in the depths. Mark clenched his jaw. Anxiety buzzed through him, a raw electric current that felt like static on his skin. As they ventured deeper, glimmers of light began to betray the darkness, reflecting off slick surfaces. When Mark pointed the headlamp at the wall, it illuminated something grotesque, a mural of twisted faces, mouths wide in silent screams, clawed hands extended like they were begging to be freed. Are they? Lisa started, her voice trembling. Are they real? Maybe it's just a sick joke, Mark muttered, but doubt swallowed his words. The longer they stayed in this cave, the more he felt the weight of despair wash over him. Suddenly, laughter echoed through the chamber, guttural and mocking, reverberating off the stone walls. Mark's heart lurched at the sound. It was close, too close. They weren't alone, and whatever it was, it knew they were here. Run! Mark shouted instinctively as they turned on their heels, the walls closing in around them as they sprinted back. The laughter became a twisted chorus, surrounding them, echoing their fear. Where? Lisa cried. Panic had set in, her breath coming in frantic bursts. It felt like they were being funneled through a dark tunnel with no escape in sight. Here. Mark spotted a small passageway to the left, partially hidden behind a cluster of rocks. They dove through, just as the laughter morphed into a snarl behind them. The narrow space was suffocating, forcing their shoulders together as they pressed on, Lisa's terrified gasps mixing with the thudding of his heart. The passage opened slightly into a small alcove, revealing damp earth underfoot and vines hanging from the ceiling. For an instant, they paused, gasping for breath. The darkness was thick, the air humid and cold. Somewhere beyond the shadows lay not just danger, but something urgent lurking, waiting. What do we do now? Lisa panted, her voice hoarse. Mark couldn't answer. He could feel a tremor beneath his feet, an unsettling vibration that felt like a heartbeat echoing through the cave. We can't stay here, he managed finally, shaking off the tension that had settled in his limbs. But as they turned to escape once more, a low growl emerged, shifting the air with its cruelty. It wrapped around them, enveloping them in pure dread. Mark's instincts kicked in, urging him back toward the passage. The creature, whatever it was coming closer. And then, from behind, Lisa screamed, a raw, animalistic cry that shattered the silence and pierced through the layers of horror. Mark, she shouted, panic clawing at her voice, is here. He spun around, but before he could see, before he could react, everything shattered in a cacophony of dark shapes and malevolent screeches. The creature lunged at them from the shadows, eyes glowing like fiery coals in the impenetrable darkness. Mark squeezed Lisa's hand tightly, adrenaline coursing through him, as hope faded into the abyss. He realized then that they were caught in a deadly game, one in which the rules were unknown, the stakes fatal. This was no longer just about escape. It was a fight for survival against a force that had been waiting for them. He had to find the will to fight back, or they would succumb to the shadows like all the others before them. But in that terrifying instant, Mark understood something even more chilling. There was no promise of safety outside these caves. What awaited them in the unforgiving world above may be far worse than the darkness itself. Lisa's voice was barely more than a whimper, and as the creature lunged, the darkness continued to swirl, threatening to consume them whole. With desperation propelling him forward, he darted down the passage, but Lisa faltered, and Mark felt the chasm of fear opening between them. As he turned back, praying for her to follow, the creature descended upon them like a nightmare made flesh, ready to claim them both into the void. Would they find a way out, or was the darkness already drawing them in for good? Mark's heart raced as he plunged into the oppressive darkness of the passageway, each step a desperate plea for survival. He wanted to yell for Lisa, but his voice felt swallowed whole by the looming dread. The cave seemed to pulse around him, walls shimmering with a sinister energy, and every shadow danced with malice, mocking their plight. Lisa, he finally called out, his voice a tight whisper, nearly breaking under the weight of fear. No response. Panic gripped him like a vice. He stopped, trembling as he turned back, straining his ears for any sign of her, and the stillness. The cave felt alive. The faint vibration beneath his feet intensified, reaching a fever pitch. Mark could sense the creature lingering just outside his view, breathing in shallow hitches, waiting for him to make a mistake. He darted back, guided only by instinct as the fear of losing Lisa surged through him. The alcove, once a brief sanctuary, was now a haunting reminder of what lurked just beyond the veil of darkness. Mark, her voice sliced through the silence, raw and desperate. Relief washed over him, but it quickly turned to urgency. He pushed on, back to the small opening that led into the alcove. As he approached, A darkness deeper than the cave itself coiled around the edges, projecting a sense of impending doom. "Over here," he exclaimed, willing her to see him, to come. Maybe if she did, they could conjure a path, a chance of escaping this nightmare. Lisa staggered out of the shadows, eyes wide with terror, her breath shallow. "Mark, watch out!" She pointed behind him, and he knew, with a sinking sensation, that it would soon be too late. With a chilling howl, the creature lunged, its figure horrific and distorted, a blend of nightmare and shadow. Mark dove sideways, narrowly avoiding its jagged teeth, which snapped where he had just stood. In that moment, raw survival instincts kicked in. "Run! Now!" he shouted, pulling Lisa as she stumbled, trying to keep pace. The laughter returned, grotesque and unending, echoing off the cave walls and combining with the creature's snarls. It was like a symphony of madness surrounding them, feeding on their fear. They dashed into the darker recesses of the cave, each footfall reverberating as they fled deeper. The light from the headlamp flickered uncertainly, casting fleeting shadows that felt like hands reaching for them. Mark gritted his teeth, forcing himself not to look back. "Where are we going?" Lisa cried, her voice laced with desperation. "I don't know," Mark replied, feeling the cold grip of panic tightening in his chest. "We need to find a way out." As they turned a sharp corner, the passage narrowed to a barely passable width, strewn with sharp stones and dripping foliage. But just ahead, a faint light flickered. Hope? Or another deception? Mark surged toward it, heart pounding wildly. "Stay close," he urged, leading her forward. But as they approached the light, the air thickened, charged with an overwhelming sense of dread. It was a false beacon, designed to lure them closer to whatever darkness lay ensnared within. Lisa hesitated. "Mark, I feel something wrong." "Keep going," he insisted, but he could feel it too, a weight pressing down around them, whispering accusations, dragging them toward despair. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Lisa stumbled, and Mark reached out, just as the floor split beneath them, opening into a gaping chasm. "Mark!" she screamed, fear heightening the pitch of her voice. With a final effort, he lunged for her hand, grasping it just before they both would have plummeted into darkness. "Hold on," he yelled, summoning every ounce of strength he had left. The creature's growl surged once more, echoing through the chasm as he pulled Lisa back, her body quaking in terror. But the cracking roar of the cave and the vile laughter only deepened, encircling them like a noose. In that moment of breathless suspension, they both knew whatever lay above, waiting for them, was less a sanctuary than the depths of terror that now encased them. "Mark," Lisa whispered, her grip tightening. "What if we don't get out?" He wanted to assure her, to say they'd find a way. But as the chasm yawned, bearing its gaping maw, Mark realized the truth. They were not just battling the darkness. They were trapped in a nightmare that would not let them go without a fight. The laughter echoed again, mocking them, as the chasm hungered, its darkness inviting them into a far greater abyss. But above the din, another sound broke through, a small, pleading voice, echoing against the stone. "Help me!" It was faint, almost lost in the laughter, but it reached them nonetheless. Who or what was it? Mark's heart quickened with a mix of dread and determination. "We've got to find that voice," he shouted, squeezing Lisa's hand as he pulled her toward the flickering light. Both hope and terror intertwined as they moved, propelled by a desperate urge to uncover the source of the call. And in the shadows, unseen eyes watched, waiting. What awaited them in this sinister underworld? Mark's heart thundered as they tore through the churning darkness, the echo of that small, desperate voice resonating in his thoughts. "Help me!" It ricocheted through the cave like a ghost, pulling them closer to the flickering light that danced just ahead. "Do you hear it?" Mark shouted over the oppressive silence, his voice trembling with urgency. "Yeah." Lisa gasped, her grip tight around his arm. But what if it's a trap? He didn't care, he had to reach that voice. The path narrowed even more, the weight of the darkness pressing down, suffocating their hope. But they kept moving, pain and fear morphing into resolve. "We have to try." With every step, The light intensified, and Mark felt a surge of adrenaline. What if this was the salvation they sought? Maybe this light was the key to saving Ben, to breaking the spell of the shadows that clutched at their souls. Suddenly, they stumbled into a new chamber, vast and raw, like a hidden sanctuary of horrors. The flickering glow illuminated twisted stalactites dripping with something dark and thick blood. At the center of the cavern stood a stone altar, ancient symbols etched into its surface. And there, bound by shadows, was a small figure, the source of the voice. Ben. Mark's heart leaped, shock erupting within him. Racing toward the altar, he realized that the shadows kept tightening around the figure like ropes, feeding on the childish fear. "Help me, Daddy," Ben cried, his small voice cracking under the weight of despair. Tears streamed down his face, and Marcus' heart shattered at the sight. Nothing else mattered. He had to save him. "Stay strong, buddy. I'm coming," Mark shouted, pushing through layers of darkness that clawed at him with malevolent force. But the shadows were alive, pulling back, resisting him like a living entity. "Let him go," he roared, feeling desperation tinged with rage as he fought against the oppressive weight of evil that surrounded them. Lisa's eyes shone with fear. "Mark, we have to. There must be a way to break this." Fingers trembling, Mark reached for the ancient symbols lining the altar. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of echoes swirling around him, drowning out his thoughts. "Join us." Give in the shadows clawed at him, urging him toward surrender. "No," he shouted defiantly, the truth burning bright in his chest. "I will not abandon my son." He focused on the altar, tracing the markings, and in that moment, a connection flared between him, Ben, and the darkness. It was a battle for each soul, and Mark felt it pulsing with life, with memories everything the cave had consumed. "Let him go. He belongs to the light, not your darkness," Mark shouted, summoning every ounce of willpower. The shadows rippled violently, recoiling as if in pain. Ben whined, twisting against his bonds, desperation fueling his struggling. "Daddy, I'm scared." Mark's heart ached. Tears stung his eyes. "I'm right here, Ben. Together we can beat this." He reached deeper into the darkness, remembering every moment, every laugh, every joy he had shared with his son. That love burst forth, exploding into radiant energy radiating from him. Suddenly, golden light burst from the altar, illuminating the chamber, banishing the shadows. Mark felt weight lift from his body. Hope ignited in his chest. "Mark now," Lisa shouted, grasping his arm, pulling him toward their son. Together, they rushed to Ben, grasping his tiny hands, unity infusing their strength. "Hold on, Ben. We're getting out." As they pulled, shadows lashed out, furious, but the light surged stronger inside them. Mark stumbled, his breath hitching as he felt the shadows clawing at their bodies, desperate to reclaim their prize. Lisa screamed, "Just a little further." With a final surge, they yanked Ben free from the altar, and suddenly the shadows recoiled, howling, as light erupted, driving them back into the depths. They stumbled into the hallway, breathless and gasping. As the cave pulsed behind them, the laughter fading into pained wails. "It's collapsing," Mark shouted. The walls trembled, and he turned, pulling Ben and Lisa back toward the flickering light, rushing toward the entrance they had come from, now framed by radiant brightness. They dashed forward, limbs burning as the cave groaned, rocks falling behind them. "Keep moving," he urged, his voice breaking under the weight of their escape. Emerging into the light, the forest felt alive again, the air crisp and fresh. They fell forward together, collapsing onto the ground as chaos erupted behind them, a final, furious roar followed by an overwhelming silence. Mark looked around, breaths coming quick and gasping, disbelief flooding him. They had escaped. The darkness had been defeated, and the shadows had retreated, but they knew the scars would last. "Ben." Mark hugged his son tightly, relief flooding in waves. Lisa wiped tears from her eyes, smiling through the horror. "We did it." Mark looked into the tree line where shadows crept and whispered, a reminder of what had nearly taken them. We made it, but we have to tell people to keep them safe. As sunlight poured through the trees, they walked away from the forgotten caves, hearts heavy but filled with a fierce understanding. They had faced the darkness and survived. But the shadows still lingered, hidden away for another day. And as they trudged onward, Mark felt the urgency to heed the shadows' final whispers within him, a call to share their story. So, you need to subscribe now. Folks, we're just getting started here, and trust me, you don't want to miss the next exclusive stories we have lined up for you. Smash the like button now. Come on, help feed the algorithm so more people hear these tales. This is the moment to show your support. Don't hold back. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about how this wild adventure wraps up. And for your true fans out there, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this epic conclusion. The shadows are waiting, and they want to know. Will you join us?